I'm Tim Ventura, and we're joined today by Simon Holland, a filmmaker, science communicator, and online influencer. Simon is known to over 100,000 fans as the indomitable Professor Simon and the creator of a highly popular series of educational and entertaining videos on YouTube. What his fans may be less aware of is his decades-long career in broadcast TV production and editing, which includes editing for the BBC, Nat Geo, Discovery, Smithsonian TV, Ch4 and Ch5. Over the course of his career, Simon has also produced films for the University of Hawaii NASA-funded program Finding Earth Killer Asteroids, as well as a French recorded history project, and much more. Simon, welcome back.
It's a pleasure, Tim. I so enjoy your content. I literally stop whatever I'm doing to listen to you and your fascinating guests. It's great. The real cutting edge of what's going on in physics and science. I love it. It's a real inspiration, and But I guess that's what we're going to talk about today: is how we, what is social media science? How does it work?
What? Yeah, I want to talk about, let me see, I have notes. I brought notes up. I do not have like written speaking dialogue, but I do have notes. I wanted to talk about UFOs, the UFO community, critical thinking, YouTube, and things along those lines, right?
Perfect.
Because we are part of this larger, well, it's a microcosm of society. We're part of this online YouTube thing that's going on, and it's growing. And in some ways, it's out of control, right? It's this organic mess that we contribute to. So,
it is. Yeah. I mean, as your very kind and generous introduction said, I mean, I worked in TV since 1978, and I've never worked on a film about flying saucers. I mean, if ever me or a producer friend ever mentioned to an executive producer, program strand editor, we should do the phenomenon, we would just be laughed at. So mainstream media really has handled whatever is going on very badly over the years. And then today, they seem to be just not asking really sensible questions. I really do think you and myself in a small way and a few other really good channels here on social media are the only people really getting to grips with it, with fantastic interviews, whistleblowers, and bits of information which, we can do. They're not the subjects that broadcast media ever would touch with the barge pole, and today I think what's left of broadcast media is handling it very badly. So, social media science, I think, is where it's at.
For me, it comes down to three words: publish or perish. And what I've seen is, when it comes to UFOs, the folks who start out in this area, and I'm thinking of the mainstream networks, they get into it and they realize their viewership goes through the roof, right? And so they'll produce a special and they'll get these amazing results. And then some executive will look at that and say, oh my God, look at those numbers, do more. So they start to do more. And the problem is, I mean, by its very nature, the phenomena comes and goes, right? You can't just look up in the sky and see a UFO every night. It's one of those things it's random, it's unpredictable, it doesn't happen. You can't just put a camera out and grab one.
It's really hard.
So they exhaust their pool of witnesses, of speakers, of ideas, of sightings. They just burn through it, and you try and build a series off it. And then next thing you know, there are a few series on cable right now where it's like people freak themselves out in the middle of the wilderness. I'm not going to name any names, but they go out in the middle of the wilderness, freak themselves out, and say, look, we caught something on camera. Oh.
Yeah, I see that kind of stuff. No, I mean, also it's very hard for science to do the science of the phenomenon, because I mean it's great that Avi Loeb and people are setting up sensors, but it's very unpredictable, and we have to deal also with a lot of just witness reports. But going back to the media, I think the kind of ancient aliens idea and push and all of that, I mean, it's just looking for clicks, really. I mean, I don't think the media are really deep diving into the military aspect, the political aspect, the international aspect, or the science, the physics. I think they shy away from that, and they just go with the more freaking out in the woods story.
I think that a good part of the audience is looking for emotional validation, right?
Yeah.
And this is the echo chamber phenomena. They have had an experience, they've had something unique that happened to them, and they're saying, I want other people to validate that this is real, right? I want them to support me emotionally. And so they go online and they go to forums and they watch YouTube videos, they turn on cable TV, and they find these resources that say, yes, it's real. What happened is real. But the problem is the price that they pay for that is that they're asked to give up their own critical thinking. And so not only is what happened to them real, but all of it, anything that anybody reports is real. And then we get into dangerous territory because, again, publish or perish. So it's like you flush the handle and you see the spiral as it goes down the drain,
Very good.
So.
No, I completely agree. And, the Internet has, ever since its inception, was about, confirmation bias. If you...
Yes.
I mean, if you saw something strange and you don't know what it is, and somebody's telling you it's from the planet Zog, you'll look at all of those confirmation bias answers, whereas you really need to be critical thinking and think about what it could be, and maybe it really was an alien, or maybe it was something else.
So the first one, I think, on the internet was Coast to Coast AM. They weren't the first website, but I was, at the time, this was like 1995, right? I mean, CNN was doing shows about this new thing called the World Wide Web.
Right.
And the Art Bell show, Coast to Coast, put up a website. And the idea was, they didn't even stream at first. It was just visit our website and we have some photos related to tonight's show.
Right.
Well, anybody who was into the paranormal, including UFOs, went there. And I remember their web counter rolling over. It was just like 100 million. Then 3 weeks later, 100 million.
Right.
And the reason was because they were one of the only websites online that had this kind of material. So it's been there since the beginning,
Well, people criticize me for being a rational thinker and looking at other explanations, but UAP are real. People have seen things in the sky that they don't understand for centuries, and in all cultures globally, and so there is something out there. There's the nature of the phenomenon is mostly unknown. And it does need people to actually look at, but it needs to be looked at sensibly, and it seems that the UFO community tend to fall into this trap of wanting one simple explanation. Yes. So if my little fingers on my humble YouTube channel, people say. Continually saying, you're saying that Foo Fighters were a type of experimental plasma produced by a continuous wave radar, which they might be, and that wasn't the flying saucer that I saw in my field. I know it wasn't. There is a kind of wanting to correlate them all together into one simple answer. And everything needs to be investigated individually. There is no correlation, really, between what most people see. I mean, a few things do come together globally and internationally, and I think that's very interesting, but most are unique and need individually looking at.
Yeah, these events are exceptions, right? Again, you can't just go out in your field, point the camera up, and capture one. Now, one of the comments that I recently had that stuck with me, I've seen this a couple of times, was somebody had said, Tim covers a lot of different topics. I don't like any of those. I only like UFO stuff, so I visit his channel sometimes. And what got me about that was there were a few things that were kind of concerning. But yes, I do try and cover different topics. I do tend to silo them. But there is an intersectionality as well. And one of the things that I have come to feel is unless you have studied a little bit about SETI, space science, xenobiology, evolutionary biology, things along those lines, you can't really grasp the UFO phenomena because we're talking about something that touches on all of these different areas, right? So people who just do that one thing and they're like, I just do UFO stuff. Well, okay, you may have news reports then, but you're not going to really have a deeper understanding.
No, I think some people are like that, and then occasionally I'll come across somebody who's unbelievably knowledgeable and has looked at the, look at Dr. Knuth. I mean, there's amazing depth of knowledge in EO and SEO. I mean, it's brilliant, and some viewers really. What I find on my YouTube channel is a lot of kind of flippant, silly comments, and then probably about once a day I get something that really shakes me to the bone. It's somebody who literally, they listened and they have a new piece of information. And there are people out there with amazing bits of stuff. I mean, my flippant catchphrase, "the truth is out there," was not so much about the X-Files, although there was obviously a reference, but it was because people spend their entire life being an expert in a field, and you need to share that information. And I get people either privately, emailing me privately with information that is unbelievable. Just this morning, I had an email from a chap totally unrelated to the film I did on the Big Bang, and he said, "You might be interested that my mother worked in a mental hospital with Americans, and she didn't know what they were there for." Now, I'm not going to reveal the full story yet, but that's something I'm researching.
Okay.
I mean, it's that kind of insight is how our stories move forward. So, and that's what I enjoy about your channel, because you get, advanced aerospace people. You get people talking about philosophy. You get talking about psionics. You get all kinds of people on your channel, and I realize that it is all related. It's great.
For me, and I know that you have the same motivations, right? Because you're retired from broadcast media, and so this is your passion project. It's the same way for me, and I should just put this out there for the audience. Nobody doing YouTube, at least in our niche, is doing it for the money. I don't monetize any of my channels, and the reason is I haven't monetized in like 15 years or something. I tried it years ago, and I did the calculations, and I realized, you know what? If you break this down, like the most I could possibly make is like $100 a month with my audience, and I'm like, you know what? I'll save them the hassle, So I don't. The reason I do this was I had a really boring corporate job, and there were aspects of it that I enjoyed, but they weren't intellectual and they weren't big ideas. And so I quite literally, I sat down 3 years ago and I said, I want to have thoughtful conversations, and I thought back to when I used to do science and technology interviews, and I was like, I loved talking to people like that. Now, admittedly, some of that's boring, right? As you know, you get elderly scientists on the phone, I mean, and they'll tell you stuff that you don't need to know and you don't want to know, for hours.
I know.
But there's an emotional reward to it also. And so
that's what you did. You had a history before YouTube of interviewing people? Oh, great. Was this for a magazine, or what kind of outlet were you?
During the I've done. My story is somewhat complex, but I got into the web. I got into computers. Right. It was like a big vacuum cleaner. I got sucked up into Redmond, Washington. Right. During the .com boom. I got into it in '95. I started building and managing websites. I got into cyberculture. After the .com crash, I was into propulsion, science, and tech, so I started a website called American Anti-Gravity. I started meeting all of these really unique innovators, as well as scientists, as well as, a few of them were like coast-to-coast type celebrities. It just this mishmash of people who were outside of the mainstream.
Right.
And at first, they would tell me their stories on the phone. I'd try and take notes. And I was like, I need to record this. I'm missing it. And so I started doing these science and technology interviews 20-something years ago now.
On audio only before we had streaming and Zoom.
Audio and video, a lot of them are still up. And,
oh, great.
And, and it's what I've found, I mean, again, 20-something years experience now, the most interesting people and the most valuable knowledge typically comes from people you've never heard of, right? Or someone like yourself who is behind the scenes, because you work producing stuff, but you're not often sharing kind of what's outside of that wheelhouse. So
no, I like to share that, and I like to encourage people to do. I think YouTube is very interesting as a medium. I think that it is a way of reaching an audience. I do think that YouTube itself is missing out on an amazing thing that they could do. They could be the world's heroes if only they paid for content, rather than have 1% of their creators. 99% people don't monetize. The 1% who do, they basically pay peanuts, and it's all very much based on advertising. And when you do monetize, you realize that YouTube advertising monetization policy brings censorship, because the advertisers who pay more money, if that's what you are trying to ultimately earn an income from YouTube, are the ones who don't want to talk about UFOs. So, or science.
And this gets us into internet advertising. Now, I can segue for a moment. I did work, again, when I was in corporate America, I worked in executive management. I also had marketing responsibilities, marketing budgets, ad reviews, all that kind of stuff. And so there is some change without casting too many aspersions. One of the things, when I first started on the web, internet advertising was almost free. And the reason was it was kind of a bidding system, but it was based on what people were willing to pay. People weren't willing to pay a whole lot. And so, the cost to run ads was very cheap, and then the payouts were very cheap.
Right.
And when players like Google got involved, one of the things that they did was put in quality factors. This is something, I don't know if you're aware of this, but I think Facebook does this. I know Google does this. What they'll do is they'll basically say, well, we think that this is worth this amount of money, and then the bidding goes on top of that. And that is how Google is, because they're primarily ad revenue driven as a business. They are, hundreds of billions of dollars a year now?
I think it's probably the world's biggest source of advertising revenue is definitely on streaming and social media. I mean, you just don't see adverts on billboards or in magazines anymore, or on TV. The advertising budget seems to go that way. Oh, that's very interesting. I had a long conversation with a manager at YouTube about why if you make YouTube films and are monetized, you get this thing called rate per 1,000, or RPM rate. And mine seemed particularly low when I checked with other YouTube creators who were doing, I have mates who cover new releases of Apple products and financial services and things like that. And they were earning $20 to $50 per 1,000 views. And I, at the very best, was earning 1 or 2. And it was also in euros, which is fine because I live in France. So I asked, why is there such a difference between the same length of films, the same number of viewers, but you're paying an Apple review so much more? And they were very open with me, and that reflects exactly what you've just said, and I didn't realize it, is that they say we categorize the subject matter of the content before we open the bidding. So you, he said, are in the science, educational, possibly UFO phenomenon category, and we have placed you in the marginal advertiser category. He said, that's fine. Well, it isn't. It's not fine. But so he said a lot of advertisers can check a tick box saying we don't want to be associated with people dealing with what Google have already called people like me marginal. So if you're reviewing lipstick and unboxing and Apple products, you're not in the marginal category, and it's an open bidding war. If you're in the marginal category, immediately the advertising rates are lower, and you get all the slightly peripheral adverts, unless it's an open-minded company who just say, I want to advertise everywhere, and you get that as well. But it certainly reduces the rate that a creator can earn because the advertisers are offered a much cheaper rate.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And again, the folks who were really making a killing in this area are doing the most generic content because it appeals to the largest audience. And I think that goes to what you were saying about broadcast media not handling it well. It becomes mashed potatoes because everybody can choke down mashed potatoes, right? Not everybody wants something spicy. The problem is when you remove all the spices, there's no filler there, right?
There's no content at all. No, exactly. And it would be just brilliant to break that model. And you realize that, the other thing that YouTube do is you're constantly up against something called advertiser-friendly guidelines as well. So it's a very good tip if you are watching this and are thinking of becoming a YouTube creator. I think if I had one enormous tip is to post your film at least 6 to 24 hours unlisted before you make it public. And that gives the algorithm a time to find an audience for your subject by analyzing the word content, turning your spoken word into text and then finding an audience, but also filtering it through every possible copyright violation and advertiser-friendly guidelines. Because if you just go edit, publish, you could end up in 3 or 4 hours being demonetized and copyright claims. And also, the algorithm isn't human. It is an algorithm.
Yeah, it's an algorithm.
And it needs to match what you're doing to a target audience because that makes them more money, and it also puts your film out to the right people, and that takes time. So upload before you publish. A day would be ideally.
Well, so I wanted to talk about critical thinking, too, because every few years a new whistleblower comes out with the same story, right? This goes back. What's interesting is we're in this UFO renaissance. Folks don't realize that today's UFO renaissance goes back over 70 years. There were UFO cults, right? There were folks who thought that UFOs were from the planet Venus back in the 50s. I think George Adamski, but don't quote me on that. There were the Realians. They're still around. There was Heaven's Gate. They're not with us anymore because they were a UFO cult that committed suicide in the 90s.
That's right.
So every few years, somebody comes along and says, I have the answers. Follow me. And a bunch of people follow them. And so my suggestion to anybody in this area is use your own best judgment. If it doesn't sound legit, don't buy into it.
Right. And I, as a European, I would also say be international. There's amazing UFO stuff. It might not be in your language, but look at Brazil, look at France, and deep dive into the British UFO culture as well and information. Don't just... It seems to me that the media and YouTube and social media so concentrate on what's happening in the United States, and not every flying saucer lands in Wisconsin. I mean, I'm sorry to say that. It was unbelievably interesting moving to France and seeing what an open culture they have about OVNI, unknown aerial phenomenon, and how they have a public website where you can go and add your phenomenon that you've seen, and it will be categorized, and a map is drawn, and it's now an incredible database of things. Because the basic principle is, if they are aliens, if they are ET, or even if they're a Earth phenomenon, they're going to be in Zimbabwe. They're going to be in all over the world. They're not just going to be in New Jersey. So we need to look at stuff that is international. So keep an open mind, folks.
Well, and I have a couple of recommendations too. One
Yes.
of them is, so I did an interview with a fellow named Mark Roediger, and he is by no means the only old timer out there. But what interested me was, we did this I think last week, the week before. He actually came up working for J. Allen Hynek. He runs the Center for UFO Studies.
Oh, yeah.
I was not familiar with him. I was not
Right.
familiar with his work. As I started to learn about him, I was like, oh my God, this guy has been in this area since longer than I was alive.
Right.
I mean, that long. There are people out there who are subject matter experts doing incredible science. And they just don't get the attention that the folks who are screaming at the top of their lungs do. It doesn't mean that they are not doing incredible work. So.
Oh, I know. My dream is that one day I'm going to go to a conference or bump into Jacques Vallée, because he is a real hero of mine. Because I mean, so much of what we have in current UFO world and the databases that he established as a concept, as databases in computing, and the way that UFOs are categorized, all came from Jacques. And, you know, he's an elderly chap. And then, Tim, I absolutely lap up your interviews with the now elderly people, you know, like Russell Targ. Just amazing chap who his work really touches on what we're seeing today. Understand what Russell really knows, and you understand what's going on. I mean, fascinating.
Well, and for me, that is, I don't know what you would call it, but that is an enormous reward, right? That's part of my ego trip. And it's not in terms of, like, a lot of folks want to be famous, right? Like they you know, that's their ego trip. But, like, for me, being able to talk to my heroes, my childhood heroes, people that I used to listen to on Coast to Coast, I'm like, how is this even possible, right? I mean, that for me is just like, oh my God, you know, that's the opportunity of a lifetime. I just try not to do the wide-eyed, but I do that occasionally. There have been a few where I'm just like, you know, you're my hero.
Yeah, I know. Same here. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. No, and that's a great privilege for us. But I mean, we have that. You know, we have that ability to publish, so that's great. I think we have that. You know, we need to respect and honor these people. You know, It's very, very good. And so many of them are incredibly generous with their time. You introduced me to Jack Sarfati, and Jack and his wife actually came to my house here in France and stayed in this very room. That room behind you was Jack Sarfati's library, where he, with his laptop, you know, did research into Jack Sarfati stuff. I mean, it was just really, really kind of you, Tim, to introduce me. And Jack is an amazing chap, a maverick in his own field, but I mean, what he's talking about and the stuff that he knows. And the one thing that really, really impressed me with Jack is that he is standing on the shoulder of his giants, of the people who taught him. I mean, he went to college and had tutors and heads of departments, you know, who literally built the bomb, you know, and you know, I was like, I didn't realize all this. While he was here, I was saying, oh, Jack, you should maybe, I've got contacts at the Cavendish Laboratory in Cambridge. And I said, you could go over and talk to Roger Penrose. And he went, I know Roger. Okay, oops. Yeah, sure. You know, he really goes back there and he knows a lot of people. I mean, his work is slightly out there, but it's good.
And you know, you're bringing up a good point. This area, right, this community of independent thinkers is not that large. And you do have different clusters of people. They're clustered in different little groups, right? I mean, the consciousness folks have their own little area, but that overlaps with UFOs.
Seems to.
You know, and then, I mean, Penrose is in physics. They have their own little area, but then that overlaps with UFOs. These intellectual micro-communities, that's the way that I call them. And when you get into this, anybody who is connected to this UFO topic, you've probably got maybe 200 key names or less. Yeah. And they all know each other, you know? So
they definitely do. And it's amazing. I think what you're doing, and I think what social media are doing generally, is putting connections together. I mean, remember the wonderful James Burke, I mean, I worked with James on Connections way back in the BBC, and that was its real strength. I
loved Connect. I actually bought that on DVD for my daughter years ago.
The DVD's great. Well, you'll see my name in the credits. It's great, and what James and his team did was do that connection. You know, what is the connection between the humble quarter-inch tripod and a battery? You know, and he would take you on that journey, and I think he is a real kind of mentor of mine, and I think I like trying to make those connections between. I mean, where other people are doing it. I mean, what's coming out now is this whole word psionics, and we're talking about consciousness and its connection with non-human intelligence. I think that's just fascinating because you and I both know that there's something in that, which is...
Well, the question that haunts me in this particular area, in terms of UFOs, right? Because I cover several different topics, and I'm engrossed in all of them, and I do tend to silo them. But in terms of UFOs, I think it's well established that something is going on. And yet, for 75-something years now, no one has come up with a definitive solution. We have a pretty good idea what's happening, but it's turned into this he said, she said. It's like the government won't tell us. The government says they don't know. It's this roadblock, right? Now, we may be seeing some progress in Congress. We may be seeing a new era of openness happening.
Yeah,
but I think that there needs to be more science that's done to, like you said, make the connections and actually start to solve the big questions that have been out there for 75 years.
Well said. Absolutely well said. I completely agree. And I do think that some aspects of the phenomenon that I've certainly come across has been militarized. There's certainly defense contractors looking at it. The whole idea of the 5 observables was very much, a lookup table for a defense contractor or a government to look at how something that they don't know behaves, and to see how what wide blue thinking could actually reproduce those as a craft. So, and then you get into the whole world of it's secret, Yeah. So it's a problem. I would love to know more, but you keep on coming up against defense secrets and things like that. So I don't know.
That troubles me because that's used a lot of times as a cover for lies, right? It's like, I can't tell you because it's classified.
Right.
Oh, okay. And one of the things that's troubled me, again, in our UFO renaissance is we seem to have taken a head turn, or, a U-turn there in 2023 with the Grush testimony.
Yeah.
He came forward with a really compelling story, but very vague. And then it was like, oh, wait a minute. All the evidence is there. We can't tell you. It's classified. I was like, well, I'm stuck. What can I do?
You're stuffed. Yeah, exactly.
It's like, okay, that's a roadblock. Like, so the part that troubles me is whenever someone asks you to accept something with no evidence, right? I'm like, that's not science, that's storytelling, and it has a cultural value, but I can't just accept that and say, yeah, this is how it is, without any indication at all of why,
Completely agree. I think one way around it is to look farther afield. I think we should look at other countries. We should look at other cultures. We should look at what a global thing. Although so much of the global allies are tied in together with secrecy, but to get to the bottom of real truths, I think we need to be as open-minded as possible. And I worry as a European that so much of it is centered on Congress and skiffs and whistleblowers. And I'm going, what about the UFO over Toulouse? It's like, there really are other people doing the same research and looking at what it could be. So viewers, be as open-minded. Search around. One of the things that happened to me by happen chance is that I was approached by this company called NordVPN, and they said, do you want to promote and influence people to sign up? And I went, oh, okay, yeah, I like a VPN, because what a VPN opened the world to me is I realized that your country is ring-fenced. If you just put in any VPN, NordVPN's fine, and change your country of origin and look up the same search, say UFO, you get a very different response if you are on an Italian server or an African server or an American or a French or a British server. I didn't realize that. So folks out there, don't think your country is the be-all and end-all of information. Look further afield.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is a good point. And speaking from experience, there are a lot of different areas where that has impact. I know of one company very well that has, they do outsourcing. I'm not going to say who. And the website that they have in the country where they outsource to is very, very different than the one where they outsource from. And they have worked very hard to make sure that those two don't mix, right? You don't want to have your customers and your employees in the same place at the same time, kind of a thing. So,
that's really interesting. Yeah, I get that. Oh, that must be a challenge for business. I can see that.
There's a lot of it's kind of a shell game, but.
And I think that's so true of so much of the internet. I mean, I think we need to understand more how it works. So what do you think of how social media is dealing with it? I mean, how are we and channels like ours actually doing quite well?
This is kind of what I've seen. I promote my podcasts. I have a pretty big network. It starts as video, it gets converted to audio, it goes out to a bunch of different audio streams, and that's that's podcasting, right, in its traditional form.
Sure.
Then I also promote those on all the social media networks.
Right.
And what I have found is probably my favorite social network, I think, overall is LinkedIn, not for UFOs. Right? Because it's more formal, it's more structured, it's work-related. People aren't talking about that as much. The big one seems to be Twitter. The thing that drives me nuts about Twitter is Twitter is a cross-section, or X is a cross-section of the entire demographic.
Right.
And so you've got hardcore people mixed in with folks who were completely lost, right? And it's just it's a free-for-all. So that's the challenge there. And then with Facebook, one of the big ones is Facebook groups, but what I found is a lot of those are completely fake. I think they call it Facebook for a reason, I think. So
my problem with Facebook is that I don't really understand or have any control over who's looking at my content. Everybody on Facebook complains that, where did my friend disappear to? I mean, I think they kind of somehow filter your friends and your contacts. And I don't feel that putting a link to one of my YouTube films on my Facebook page is going to reach somebody in Brazil. I don't think it is. It's very limited.
Well, Facebook has a very heavy algorithm that they run, right? And so when you post something, who it gets displayed to, when it gets displayed, how it gets displayed, that is all very heavily processed. And from what I understand, there have been complaints that they gear their algorithm towards things that are emotionally upsetting. They want to get people excited, angry, overjoyed, pissed off, one of those, agitated states, one way or another.
Right.
Because they're more responsive to ads, they're more responsive to posts. And so there are a lot of games that are going on behind the scenes there.
Yeah. Yes, I entered YouTube because I felt there were so many stories and broadcasts that weren't made. That was the original idea. I had a list of friends and research and things that every Nova program has at least half a dozen that never got commissioned, and so that's what I started off doing. But then I kind of realized that the subjects that people really want to see are UFOs, and they got more hits and clicks. But I'm a film editor and storyteller, but what I'm not is you need to be on YouTube. You need to be a jack of all trades. You need to do good audio. You need to be a great designer for the thumbnails that we should talk about. And you also need to be a social media manager. And I found that the graphic design and social media management I found quite stressful. I can make a film, I can spend a couple of days researching, I can film it in the morning and maybe take a day editing, but it can take a week to manage YouTube and social media and posting and designing a clickable, attractive thumbnail. What's your views on that? What's your skill base?
Yeah, well, actually, that was why we connected tonight. So I'm doing a test, and I think it may be permanent because it takes a lot of work. I'm switching out the thumbnails that are just images, right? Like I used to do, it'd be like a picture of you and me right here, right? And we just take a picture and put it up.
Right.
and that works and it has value. But what I found is you go to my channel online and you look, and it's just like, number one, I'm seeing way too much of my face, It's like there's me in every frame. I'm like, oh, my God. But then the other part, too, is, I meet a lot of folks they're using all sorts of different webcams. They have different sizes and resolutions. And I'm just like, I want something that looks more exciting. And so what I'm testing now is stock art. And the idea that I have is really my show is about people and ideas. And so instead of highlighting the person in the thumbnail, I'm crossing my fingers and trying to highlight the idea. And then once they click into it, they'll see us anyways.
Who are going to be talking about a subject, and if you just see a face and you've never heard of them, it doesn't. I mean, obviously you have a title, but you're right. And I think that could be a good approach. Something that YouTube creators have been screaming for YouTube for years is this thing called A/B testing, where you can come up with 2 or even 3 thumbnails, and they will randomly put them out to viewers, and they'll report back as a graph which one got more clicks. So you can, Tim, you can test that. And I personally, I think that your image and the way that you look is very branded. I mean, I think it is. We know that it's a Tim Ventura show with you and your lovely studio and how you look, and everything's great. But I think you are possibly missing out for a viewer who doesn't get the subject of the conversation by seeing somebody that they don't know who they are. So try it.
Yeah. Fingers crossed, right? I mean, I'm hoping that it. I'm hoping that it works. I just, on my channel, I don't have nearly the number of subscribers that you do. I've just passed 20,000. Right. So I have a small enough pool that I could shake hands and thank every single one of them, you know? Say, thank you, thank God, So I do have 20,000. It's not nearly as large as yours. You're well over 100,000 now, right?
Yeah, I have this little clock that a very... niche and wonderful company in Switzerland offered to make me, and it's a live subscriber counter. And so anytime I sit down and start editing, I can see it clicking up. But the thing with subscribers is that YouTube's algorithm has changed. At one time, everybody on YouTube would say, press like and subscribe and ring the bell. Well, that whole concept of ringing the bell for notifications, if you are subscribed to that channel, I think they've just basically dropped or don't bother doing it anymore. I think the algorithm is far cleverer. They're looking at what you looked at before and are trying to find exactly the same film. And I don't think they push even channels. They don't even suggest channels that you are subscribed to. So the subscription thing isn't related to your viewer numbers. I get a very low... I'm always surprised at how few in the YouTube analytics, they tell me how many subscribers who were suggested to watch the film watched it. And you would think that, if you like the channel and subscribe, and I subscribe to half a dozen channels that I really like, including yours, of course, and every time Tim or whoever it is that's posted a channel, I'll stop what I'm doing and watch your stuff.
Because I subscribe to yours because you're doing amazing work.
Well, that's how I work, but I get the impression that people press subscribe for other reasons. It's more like saying, I kind of like it, but I don't know if I'm going to watch it again. And I don't think they're reminded. I continually get comments from people going, I haven't seen any of your content. I thought you were dead, or things like that. I haven't seen content for you for months. And I go, well, I make a film about every week, so I think I'm still here. But they just weren't getting the content being pushed to them by YouTube. So a group of 20,000 loyal subscribers who love you and love your content and regularly are so overjoyed when, Tim, you post something is far more valuable than people who just press the subscribe button and don't get notifications.
Yeah. Well, and then another person making videos on YouTube. I was just on his channel yesterday because, again, I'm looking at how different people do thumbnails, right? And
yes, good.
I'm like, I was like, please don't sink the boat, Tim, And I was on Kurt Jaimunkel's channel. I haven't talked to Kurt in a few months. I wrote him an email and said hi.
Okay.
I just realized he has over 1,300 videos. And the part that amazed me, and I'm sure you know Kurt's material, his stuff, he goes deep. I mean, there have been videos where it's like, holy cow, how could someone possibly get this deep into consciousness and philosophy, science of mind, things like that? I'm like, 1,300 videos is insane. That's insane. So, yeah, I mean,
his channel is amazing, and and that's what we want. We want that kind of deep dive. Definitely. Yeah. I'm a bit more populist, but I certainly, hopefully my unique selling point is I'm fearless. I'm quite, as a retired ex-broadcast person, with no allegiances, no sponsorship, I don't work for the government. I don't work, I'm completely independent. I will bust myths. I think that's. I'm quite proud and happy to do that. And sometimes occasionally I get warned off subjects. Actually, I was
going to say politics, and politics is interesting. So I am not. I'm not a member of, here in the United States, I'm not a member of either party. I'm not a registered member of any party. I'm not publicly promoting either party.
Right.
Just to be open with anyone who cares.
Okay.
I'm a moderate swing voter.
Right.
So I support the person that I think is probably best for the job.
Good.
And God knows I've been wrong before, right? So, but it is interesting that the moment you discuss anything political, it's like people turn their brains off. And this is the same issue that the UFO community struggles with. It is social alignment and validation. It's like this political party validates how I want to see myself, and so I'm going to go along with everything they say and blacklist the other party because they're evil, right? And so both groups line up and take sides and hate each other from a distance.
It's so unpleasant. Yeah, I know. I never had come across the term debunker until I started making YouTube videos and met the UFO community, and that just seems so crazy. I mean, I think that somebody like Mick West, who's seen as the ultimate debunker, actually does a fantastic job, because what Mick's doing is he's not Mick, I've met him, I know who he is, he's a really nice chap, by the way, and what he's doing, which is incredibly brave, is that he's going for the low-hanging fruit. He's saying it was JetBlue 123 that you saw on Skytracker, and that's great. I couldn't be bothered to do that. The wonderful British MOD Condign report said 80% of sightings are just misidentified.
Although, if I could interrupt, again, going back 20 years,
right?
One of the things I have found, Mick is he is one of the latest, but I mean, there have been. there have been dozens that have come and gone, and professional skeptics are parasites. That by definition, professional skeptics are parasites. It is a parasitic profession. It would not exist without something to be skeptical of. Therefore, they exist through parasitic behavior. So I know that makes me bad to say that, but
my impression from talking to him, Midwest, is that he would be as excited as you and I and the UFO community to have genuine evidence of something that's genuine. He's using his skill and background in gaming and computing and algorithms and writing software at being able to filter out the obvious.
And I don't dislike Mick West. I would say that if I had a criticism, an honest criticism of Mick's stuff, it is he seems to overly rely on the physical evidence part of it, and he leaves out the psychology aspect of it too much. You know, and now that I've done my parasite ad lib for the community, I think that there absolutely is a place for skeptical inquiry, right? You have to keep your own imagination in check, because it's too easy to go out on a limb and you keep going further and further and further out, right? So there is a place for a skeptical review. The part that gets me is professional skeptics who are skeptical of everything. That's the part where, you know, and what I have found is there are a lot of things that aren't able to be dismissed.
Right.
And so what happens is professional skeptics tend to burn themselves out over time also, because nobody has a 100% hit rate. So...
Yeah, no, I think I'm being maybe a bit too fair, but I just feel, for me, if I can dismiss pretty easily, it's a bird. You know, it's a single point light source that you filmed on your iPhone badly. It leaves a whole 20% of unknown. And that 20% which is left is going to be a fascinating, much more fascinating mixture of the unknown and the secret. And that's what interests me. And I would never be as blatant and as brave as Mick is, and takes on the it's a helicopter and just says it. I mean, or parallax, which is also good. You know, I think people misunderstand how their camera works and how things move. I think it's true.
There is this belief in the community, and I see this all over the place, right? There's this belief in the UFO community that if you say anything negative, you're undermining disclosure, right? We don't want to, you know, it's like, you know, you don't cheer against the home team, right? You know, we're all on Team UFO. Somebody actually wrote that the other day in a group chat. You know, there were a couple of people arguing, and somebody said, "Stop arguing. We're all on Team UFO." And I'm like, "Great." I was like, "Is that baseball or football?" You know?
Yeah, exactly.
But
I love that. That's absolutely right. And no, Team UFO should concentrate on what's actually the more interesting stuff.
But the part that troubles me is the problem is if you accept everything, if nobody speaks up when something blatantly mistaken comes along, then what happens is the average public will just shut it down and turn off. They'll say, "You know what? I knew those guys were crazy the whole time." So,
yeah, exactly. You
know, there has to be some self-policing, right? So there's got to be balance. There has to be kind of like, and again, I think it comes down to what each person independently feels. Like, does my gut feel good about this person, this claim, this story, this piece of supposed evidence, you know, or is it too flimsy? And then I think another part of that too is withholding judgment, right? Like, I don't have to accept or reject this. I can just kind of wait and see, you know. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, so. Keep an open mind, listen to everybody, certainly do some research, be global, and just listen to a lot of stuff. It's very, very interesting field, and I'm amazed how much it's all becoming connected, the more I love also deep diving into spurious and slightly dangerous military operations and tasks, and suddenly I'm getting how everything is more and more linked. This whole consciousness and psionics and things and UFOs are becoming somehow, they're separate interests of mine, but they're all just coming together. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, and I think that AI and computing also intersects with it, right?
Right.
And and then again, we've got SETI, we have space science, we have xenobiology. I mean, we have all of these different disciplines, and
Right.
and that makes sense, right? I mean, if it's an advanced extraterrestrial civilization that's millions of years more advanced than us, then all of these things would apply. It's not just going outside with the camera and saying, "Look, I got something." So.
No, please don't do that. I get daily single-point light sources on a wobbly eye camera without a reference. I find it. Please send UFO videos. Try and film them during the day would be better if you see something strange.
The other thing that I've seen is I've met several people who have said this. AI has pushed us past the point of being able to trust any video evidence.
Right. Oh, yeah. But I was. I completely agree. You can't trust anything that you see. I mean, the photorealism of AI is unbelievable. I have a contact who teaches AI video television production globally. He's probably the leading AI tutor, and he shares with me there's AI now that you can specify f-stop and lenses and to make it look as if this is for movies, so you can actually produce something which matches the camera that you were using for the real stuff. I mean, you don't realize it's not just a kind of a cheap AI plugin that you're getting from the Apple Store. Out there are highly, highly photorealistic moving video imagery stuff. I mean, it must have shaken up the CGI world, the Pixars of this world, who spent many hours with young interns rotoscoping stuff for movies. Now, I mean, it's unbelievable. I'm very excited to follow on from what you just said, Tim, about so many UFO stories are witness reports, and I'm quite excited, as long as it's flagged as generated, to be able to visualize what somebody described for the first time. So MUFON and people like that have so many, just written reports. It hovered over my car on a dark night, and then it flew off behind the trees, and then it, whatever. And it's just somebody's recollection, which is quite valid. They definitely saw something, but wouldn't it be amazing to be able to put some imagery on that, as long as it was flagged as generated based on their experience? And it's, you can do that now.
What would be really interesting is just imagine this for a moment, because you have prompt-based AI.
Yeah.
What if you could literally run that report into a prompt and have it generate a video based on the actual report?
You can.
Can you? That would be amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it sometimes completely F's up. I mean, I did a film about a Scottish monster, and its home was underwater, so I put in to an AI generation program, monster living in a home underwater, and it put Bigfoot sitting on a sofa with water on the carpet. I went, no. It was supposed to be under the sea. You have to manage the prompt. But yeah, I bet there is a way of pouring in witness statements.
That reminds me of what was the salmon swimming upstream, and this was, I don't know if you've seen that one. This was making the rounds. That was the prompt, was draw me salmon swimming upstream, and it had a bunch of fillets jumping out of the water.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Whoa, fillet! I know.
Yeah, so
it does get it wrong, and it's quite humorous. But we live in interesting times, Tim. I think that's the main thing. I am very, very aware that 2025 seems to be a time where we are pulling a lot of stuff together. I do actually have kind of hope for this new American regime that they might stumble into openness or intention to have more openness than that, let them do it, please. Go ahead. If they can actually influence and change the secret world, go ahead, please do it. But I also think that we have amazing tools right now. I think people don't discuss how we now have radio telescopes which are globally networked, and AI looking at multispectral radio analysis in a way that we've never been able to do before. I mean, I know Breakthrough Listen and Yuri Milner's group, Breakthrough Listen, are spending tons of money and time in searching for technological signatures in a way that we could never do before. And obviously James Webb, I'm amazed at how it can do a spectral analysis of an exoplanet's atmosphere as it transits a star. I mean, that is pretty smart stuff.
It's getting amazing. And then some of the other things that are kind of raising eyebrows, I guess, this is so one of them I did a show on was, does quantum computing prove the many worlds theory? Right. And that's the old David Deutsch idea. That goes back 20, 30 years.
Right.
But Google suggested that their quantum computer does that. And it's like, okay, that was interesting. There was another that I just saw, haven't even found the article it was based on, suggesting it was Bohmian mechanics, I believe. And they were suggesting that quantum computing may be changing the past to align with its computations.
Oh, you see that?
And I was like,
wow.
I was like, that's intriguing. So multiple dimensions, changing the past, time communications. We've got a bunch of interesting stuff going on.
Oh, no, and we're messing with it right now, and we're going to, we're meddling kids, but we're certainly asking some very good questions. And I continually want to unpick Russell Targ's brain and understand the mechanism that he obviously totally exploited and totally made work. A completely remote viewing and SRI worked. But why did it work? And what techniques did he use? I think it's just brilliant.
See, consciousness, for me, one of the things, again, this keeps popping into my brain, is consciousness struggles with the same stigma that UFOs do.
Yeah.
And so I absolutely love, Russell Targ is absolutely wonderful. He's a wonderful person.
Yes.
I love his work, right? He is brilliant. But the challenge that I see is anything related to consciousness, like the telepathy tapes, psychic powers, anything like that, it gets thrown out by the scientific community. And it's like, okay, this has been a part of humanity for thousands of years. How do we find a tiebreaker? And for me, it's got to be some kind of data analysis or collection, because otherwise it'll be thousands more, and they'll just keep throwing out what we all know is there.
I think what you just touched on is even wider. I think the scientific community generally are doing amazing work individually, but they, as a college, they are very much stuck in what works. And I've recently been talking to people about paradigm shift and looking at the origin of the universe story and why it needs to be redefined with new evidence. And that's just really interesting because, the scientists that I talk to and the scientific community go, well, what's wrong with the Big Bang Theory? Well, there's lots of things wrong with the Big Bang Theory. You can see that, we live in an expanding universe, but it doesn't explain a lot of things. And, I think consciousness and UFOs and things, from my contacts in astrophysics, and I have a few through personal family contacts, they just think I'm a loony. Why are you talking about flying saucers, Simon? And I go, well, they're actually quite interesting, and I think you need to be a bit more open-minded.
Yeah. Well, again, it's it seems like the world is full of micro communities, right?
Yes.
And that's, and you could add mainstream religion to those as well, and, and political views. And so, humans are tribal in nature. Maybe I should call them tribes instead of communities. But,
right.
It's like we have our turf. This is our intellectual turf, and we'll defend it to the death against anything that impinges on it.
Right.
And so, I don't know. That's our nature. We're tribal creatures, I guess.
Oh, I back in the day and working for BBC, I think it was a BBC program, we looked at tribalness, and it was just such a fascinating thing. And they redefined it in a new way what I hadn't thought about it. I'd like to float it past you and your audience, is that they said, well, there's actually two types of tribes, and there's a word that we use slightly less often, and that is a troop. So a troop is a group of animals who are totally bonded together. They're probably interrelated, and any outside person messing with the troop gets eaten and killed. Whereas a tribe actually invented the word hospitality, and they actually are open to newcomers coming in. They want to have a bigger genetic field of reproduction, and they want to grow. Where I think what we're seeing is more troopism than tribalism. Anyway, that's
interesting. So I feel like the odd person out. I have beliefs that I really hold to, but for the most part, I mean, I'm 49 years old now, so I'm pushing 50, and like I reached the point years ago. Well, for me, it's like I have been wrong so many times about so many things. And there have been distinct points in my life where I'm like, this is right. I will defend this idea to the death. And then I've had to come back later and go, holy crap, I was completely mistaken.
I love it. Isn't that great? I love those moments. So, and YouTube, as I say, YouTube, almost every day, somebody will write something which shakes me to the core and goes, I think you'll find, is often the first comment. You go, oh yeah, you're right, actually. And it's great. It's also a learning experience as a creator in doing better research, and it's good. I so enjoy this making YouTube films and deep diving into subjects, and hopefully some people. But
that's
watch
why
them.
I soften. For me, that's one of the reasons that I soften everything. Another is the corporate background, right? Because you know what, I used to work for. I remember. I was in an executive meeting. I was filling in for a VP who was sick at AT&T Wireless back in the day. Oh. And this was when I had first started there, and I'm in this room filled with, presidents and vice presidents and all, and I was like, well, we have an issue with this. And somebody looked at me and they said, Tim, you have an issue? And I was like, yeah, here, this is what's going on. They're like, well, I was like, oh, no, we have a concern. They're like, are you sure it's a concern? I was like, well, yeah. And I was like, I kept softening and softening and softening and softening, right? So, because an issue is like a serious thing. This was just like, minor potential,
Yeah, your use of language was caught. Yeah, I can imagine that. I've been in those kind of meetings.
Is that, but the other part is, again, I'm wrong all the time about lots of stuff.
Good.
So,
that's the joy of science. I mean, also people don't understand if they haven't even, if they don't grasp how science works. Is that science being wrong is its best aspect because it learns from new data. I mean, but science tends to be rather didactic and want to come up with the one solution. But that's just silly because science is always going to change when new data comes in, and as long as you realize that, the scientific principle is wonderful.
Yeah, well, and I think it goes to like broader, more resilient thinking and opinion forming as well, right? Like, because one of the things I'm always aware of is, maybe I'm mistaken about this. Or like another aspect is I view it like shining a light on something. There are a lot of topics where you look at it with the light from this angle and you're like, oh yeah, this is obviously the way this works. And then you change the light and you're like, oh, no, I can see a completely different picture now. The object remains the same. Whatever your topic is, you're just viewing it from different perspectives, right? So
Mick West was right. No, I'm joking.
See? And I was wrong.
Oh, I love being wrong.
That would make me the parasite then.
Yeah, no.
There you go.
No, keep doing it, Tim. Keep interviewing the most fascinating people in the world.
Well, I don't want to badmouth. I don't want to badmouth Mick West in any way. I was talking about professional skeptics in general as a parasitic profession. Again, the only thing that I have seen, this would go not only to Mick, but people who are doing. I think that the psychological aspect of this phenomena is being sorely neglected right now. When I was a kid, the UFO specials have been going on forever. They would always bring in psychologists who would talk about, mistaken observations and and psychological bias and and it's like that is not. I'm not seeing that these days, and that worries me because. We know that only 5 to 10% of UFO sightings are legitimate at all. The rest are just mistaken.
Yeah,
and that's okay.
I think we should, as the community should really deep dive into the highly strange. I think that's another Jacques Vallée term. I always feel worried that a metallic object enters our solar system from afar, slows down, goes into Earth orbit, descends through our atmosphere and lands. Well, there are so many issues with that they would be well spotted. We have an awful lot of sensors out there looking for exactly that for military defense purposes, and people don't see that. The phenomenon in UFOs, UAP, are something different. They are highly strange, and anything which is flying at flight levels with strobe lights, please just think, or drone-like, it's probably a drone. But when you see something which is truly weird, a UFO sighting for me would be something that I'd look up into the sky and go, I have no idea what I'm looking at. That for me would be much more real for me.
Yeah, and I had a sighting.
Oh,
I saw
right.
the stealth back in '96. I saw the stealth blimp, and I remember it was one of those things where I made myself. I was going low and slow. It went right over my house. I made myself commit every detail to memory because I was like. But it's just like, what the hell is this?
Right.
But, sometimes you have, and to this day, I have no idea. To me, honestly, I think it was man-made. It looked man-made. So that
well, a lot of in that highly strange 20% category of non-misidentification, a lot of those are going to be man-made. And Nick Pope's very good on that, saying that the MOD, when they categorized people's sightings, would write back and say, well, it's an everyday object, and then they would go, oh, it's something we know what it is, but we can't tell you. And that's an area of interest that interests me. The one, the supposedly the best UFO picture ever taken, which is the Calvin picture of the object in Scotland, seems to have so many aspects of its surface texture and its shape. And it's we don't really know how it moved, but the only report was it went up vertically. It seems to very much match an observation device more than the Jacques Vallée highly strange, and it was and it was also seen in a military low altitude test zone, right next door to a military test airfield. I mean,
and what I saw, I'm trying to think of the. I mean, people can still Google it, right? And like in the Alt Propulsion Conference, which I moderate, every now and then I'll show the image of it. But the way that you could sort of kind of visualize it is if you can imagine a Star Destroyer, right, from Star Wars, the big ones, like something that size going 100 feet over the house, more or less. Right. It was, it looked sort of kind of like that.
This is what you saw. Right.
This is what I saw. And I was looking up at it. It was lit up. It had lights on it. It was lit up by the city lights.
Wow.
It looked like it was going about 60 miles an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, it was low and slow. And I remember looking up at this thing, and I'm like, and of course, it's like, okay, this is a UFO. This is a UFO, right? And I'm like, commit this to memory. And I remember... there were a bunch of weird things, but hull rivets. And I remember looking up at it, not just hull rivets, double rivet rows. Like the old doors on the World War II battleships had double rows. And I'm like,
why would they do that?
Why would it, advanced alien. I'm like, hull rivets? Why? So,
fabulous
weird,
sighting. And
weird stuff.
I love it.
I was like, okay, maybe I'm hallucinating. And 5 or 6 years later, I mentioned it to somebody, and they're like, oh, the stealth blimp. And they sent me a photo.
Oh.
There were a ton of sightings of this thing over Europe the same year. And I was like, what are the odds? That's insane. So...
Yeah, I've kind of discovered a lot of people are looking at Defense Department and the MOD and other countries' defenses, but I didn't realize that there are other agencies who do surveillance. I mean, obviously the biggest one in the US is the NRO office, and they often commission satellites and high altitude observation devices. Not, from defense contractors. It's got nothing to do with defense. So, it's a intelligence gathering. It's ELINT and it's observations. It could be related. They often have synthetic aperture radar, and they need to have long loitering, high altitude, above flight levels aspects. There's a whole class of vehicles called HAPS, which are high-altitude pseudo-satellites. So it's cheaper to have something in our atmosphere which is up at 60,000, 70,000 feet in rarefied air that can long loiter than it is to have a low Earth orbit satellite.
And a lot of those are based off of old weather balloon designs, right?
Totally.
I've seen
some
those.
are balloons,
And when they get up to that altitude, they spread out like a mushroom. So
enormous. Right, but they can retain people don't all realize. If you talk to a high altitude pilot, Chris Lito has been really good on this. When you get above the stratosphere, when you get into the kind of upper echelons, the upper levels of that, it becomes windless. You're above any of the Coriolis effect of the rotation of the Earth, and you're above the jet stream, and you can actually have something up there that just remains static. Plus the amount of solar energy which is hitting it during the day, and obviously batteries for night. We've had the wonderful Swiss guy who flew around the world in his solar aircraft, with batteries at night and solar at day. I mean, it is possible. And there are people should just think out of the box a bit and think that there are things out there that humans have made which can be very strange looking and misidentified.
So one of the interesting ones for me has been orbs. And again, this is very much prone. You mentioned single point light sources, right? So I think orbs are probably more prone to misidentification because it looks like a light, and so lots of stuff in the distance, But at the same time, you have a lot of people who have up-close encounters with orbs. Yeah. They believe that it's communicating with them somehow. You know, it feels like there's something really there.
I love orbs.
And
I think orbs, anything that is spherical, obviously the sphericalness is happening because of our gravity and our atmosphere. And I think people should. I mean, one of the aspects of consciousness that your guests and you have talked about is the whole thing that we are not the only conscious beings. That, you know, that something like a high energy plasma might have the same levels of consciousness. There's certainly cases where people have seen orbs or UAP glowing in the sky that takes defensive action when they go near them, and that basic instinct of moving away implies a self-survival consciousness. And some of them seem to have that quality. That's the type of UFO that really fascinates me. What are they? Where have they come from? Are they part of Earth? You know, are they multi-dimensional? Fantastic story.
Well, and it's intriguing. Dr. Jim Segala, right, whom I know fairly well. He's done work with Hal Puthoff and several other folks in the past.
Right.
He went out to a hotspot in New Hampshire expecting to do photos and telemetry and data collection on UFOs, and instead got tons and tons of data on orbs that were happening. And you know, it was interesting there for him to go out looking for that and to find something completely different. And then I know Roni Vernette, I guess, has been down in the Amazon working with, I believe, tribes down there. They are seeing orbs to the point where it's a part of their culture, if I understand correctly. So
yes, I was very honored to work with. I have to remember his name. It'll come back to me. Who wrote? Keep on going through my head. Who wrote the book on Earthlights? And his whole idea is that these orbs are multicultural. They're given names in different cultures. You know, the golden lights, or in Asia, they're seen as the deceased women who died in childbirth. You know, they're seen the Min Min lights in Australia, Heseldine lights in Norway, and all that. So there, and there's definitely some association with seismic activity, especially in your part of north west the United States, possibly. Original sighting of the famous first UFO might have over Mount Rainier might have well been a orb-like phenomenon, but that could have been caused by seismic activity. I think that's just fantastic.
Yeah, it's intriguing.
It is.
And as you mentioned, different cultures describe them different ways.
Yes.
And for me, that's yet another reason not to buy into any specific cultural belief and to keep an open mind and say probably none of us have the right idea about what's happening here, right?
No. And I think that comes back to hopefully what social media science is doing. We are prepared to go and speak to people that mainstream science disregards. They think they're loonies, and the media are totally ignoring. So keep up the good work, Tim.
It'll be interesting to see how this evolves, too. And again, to take things full circle back to YouTube.
Right.
Like, online media is where all of this is happening right now. Yeah. And I think part of that is because mainstream media is just slowly spiraling the drain, right? Ratings are down, viewership is down. It's on its way out, I think, or at least for the most part.
Yeah, we've just had, literally last night, something in Britain called the BAFTA Awards, which are a major movie awards, but at the same time we've just had an industry award for camera and editing and sound and all the production design, and the take-home message from that, craft skills, is that the industry is dying. There's so many people not working right now. There are no budgets, and people broadcasters don't have the money to hire people to make the programs anymore. No, it's moved.
So, I mean, and this is kind of a quick jaunt through history, right? But in terms of TV, you had here in the United States, you had the big three, right? And then they launched PBS just so they would have something that's not the big three.
Right.
But you had the big three, and then you had local affiliates, and what they would do is the network feed, and then they would insert their own weather and local news,
Sure.
you know? And so you had these major ad budgets that were flowing into broadcast television.
Massive.
Then you had the advent of cable. Cable started to split that, right? Now you've got, like, first it was 60, then 100, then 200 channels.
Right.
And it's still the same ad budget. I mean, you've still got the same ad spend, you know, but it's being split finer and finer and finer. Now you've got the internet where you've got millions and millions of little channels, and advertisers have so much more choice that I think the big broadcasters can't maintain the momentum that they used to have, right?
Yeah, I mean, we literally only, for the first time in a decade, bought a TV for the Olympic Games that were in Paris. Before that, we stopped having a television in the house. You know, my wife and I watch what we want to watch on our mobile devices.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't remember the last, you know, water cooler discussed broadcast television program. I mean, there are still some really good ones, but fewer and fewer. Yeah.
I have one in the house because I have a home studio, right? This is a separate building. So the TV that I have in the house has been turned on once. And actually these are I don't know if you can see my
They're
arms.
monitors,
Those are televisions.
right.
Yeah, those are televisions. They have never shown anything other than this. So, you know, it's all mobile devices now. Everything. And my daughter, I have a teenage daughter.
Yes.
She has not watched a TV since Barney and the Teletubbies when
Right.
she was like 5.
Exactly. Oh.
Yeah, everything is mobile devices now.
Sure.
So.
Although I've noticed from YouTube algorithm feedback for creators that more people are watching YouTube on a smart television, slightly more than mobile devices, and hopefully that works. Something that YouTube have started last year using AI is that you can now have your films dubbed into foreign languages. So hopefully we can reach out to a Portuguese or Spanish or French or German audience or Hindi audience, which is great, because viewers can now select Tim Ventura in Hindi, which is brilliant. But I'm getting a lot of complaints from people on my YouTube channel saying, you were speaking French, because my country of content creation is France. YouTube automatically translated me into French. It's like, oh, you can switch it off, but I think YouTube are actually quite bad at communicating the features that they're saying, and I don't even know if they work on smart TVs.
Well, AI is getting better, and it needs to, because one of the other things, and I think that this is, in a weird way, it's strange that it hasn't made more of an impact. I'm thinking of Facebook. So I do a lot of stories in life extension. Eastern Europe is where tons of life extension and geriatric medicine is taking place.
Right.
And so I have contacts all over, like Estonia, Latvia, Russia, right? All of those Cyrillic writing languages. And the communications barrier is still there. You know, and so it's like you meet these wonderful people, and they have so much to share.
Right.
They're so friendly, and yet there's this language barrier that makes it difficult. So, you know, that translation for email or instant messaging would be
no problem.
so wonderful. That'd be so wonderful.
Well, I think we've cracked that. I mean, living here in France, luckily, Dorothy, my wife, speaks fluent French, which is really helpful, me poorly. But it's no problem at all if somebody sends me a text or an email, because it instantly is translated, and my horrible Google Translate version reply goes back out to them. Who knows what I actually tell them.
Quick. Yeah, it's It's a different world. It is a truly different world. I mean, one of the ones I can't remember the fellow's name offhand. I'm connected to he's the CEO of one of these health startups. For some reason, I'm stuck in this guy's algorithm. It's a 70-year-old Russian man in Moscow.
Right.
He's an old weightlifter. He will go out. I remember the one that got me was this guy's out in the Russian winter doing pull-ups on a bar in his like T-shirt.
Right.
And I'm just like, and so I'm just like, keep going. You're doing great. Keep, know, and for some reason now I'm stuck in this algorithm where it's like,
no.
but at the same time, it's interesting to see how people in completely different parts of the world are all brought together. And the reason that I think this is going to change things more than it already has is, if I can communicate directly with people on the other side of the earth and live my daily life alongside theirs, then these political narratives and animosity that should fade away, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely brilliantly. I think I have been hearing an awful lot of radio telescope stories coming out of Russia, and it turns out that a lot of their telescopes were actually in the Ukrainian area of that, or the south and east Russia, or central Russia, south, and because of that, a lot of the stories are not coming out right now. Plus, I feel a bit constrained into doing a very pro-Russian science program right now because of what's happening in the Ukraine. But I think they are really doing some amazing work. I can't wait to make a bit of that a bit more public.
Yeah. There's a lot of, I feel the same challenge, and I do defense coverage, right? And I mean, the U.S. is absolutely got one narrative on Ukraine, and it's like, don't challenge that narrative in public, So
I know.
And we do the same thing with China, right? We have a very specific narrative about China. We're like, okay, if you say this, then that's okay, and if you don't, then we'll squint at you. So
yeah, we had this. I get very nerdy here, Tim. We had this thing with the Conservative Party in the United Kingdom where they were going to deport illegal immigrants on airplanes to this terrible country called Rwanda, and everybody went, "Oh yeah, they're good." Rwanda is one of the most coolest, incredible, technological, genius, interesting countries. They deliver plasma by drones to remote hospitals. They have the best telecommunication. I'd quite like to live in Rwanda. And it was seen as this, like, rudely said, S-hole country, and it wasn't. Well, it's a fantastic nation.
Yeah, maybe that's perception not catching up to today's reality, right?
Sure, send me there today.
So, like the part that troubles me about like the China narrative here in the U.S. is China is a communist nation. They're stealing our jobs. We should be upset with them. Okay,
sure.
So yes, there's some truth there, but shouldn't we be more upset with the American CEOs who sent the jobs over there?
Totally. That's how it all started.
For some reason, we missed that part of it. We're like, it's like somebody takes your candy and gives it to the school bully. Well, why be upset with the bully? Shouldn't you be upset with the person who took your candy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we've discussed this before. People have said to Apple, why don't you make iPhones in the US? And they said, well, there isn't a place that we can go and buy 1 million tiny Type 1 screws because those manufacturing plants have long closed down. So that's a real worry.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll start to rebuild that, right? Not just here, but also in Europe. I think Europe is struggling with the same challenge.
It was. There was an enormous political change and an immense profit to put jobs offshore in the 1980s. And in the United Kingdom, certainly lost all its manufacturing basis, all the little firms who built that kind of thing that you would need to put device together have gone, and you now just buy everything from China. Here in France, it's very different. I think France has always been kept the means of production fabriqué en France is still on everything that I see.
And that is good. That is good because, another aspect of this offshoring, and I know that we're off on a massive tangent, but like another aspect of this is, in a sense, the executives who sent those jobs overseas were taking advantage of what you could call slave labor to a greater or lesser degree. They had, in China, they had suicide nets around the tech companies for years.
Right.
And it was because they would work people beyond the limits of what a person could endure for wages that they could not afford to live on. Right. And then they would sell those parts to American companies that would turn a profit and say, see, we boosted the stock price. So
I know.
So this comes right back to fat cats. This is the 1% right there.
Oh, well, the internet will hate us, Tim. We're being liberal socialists. No, we're being open-minded folks. And in the same way, we're open-minded about science, and we're open-minded about, UAP are real. I need that T-shirt because people think I don't think that's true. No, they are. They're real. And the highly strange is out there, and we need to break down barriers and actually discover what's really going on. And hopefully, I think we're living in a time of transition. I really do think that we are going to find out new information very soon. It's always around the corner, but I think there is information out there now that you can start pulling together. I think the story is becoming clearer.
Well, Simon, on that note, let me thank you so much for your time today. It's truly been a pleasure. Always an honor to have you on. I'm going to put a link to your YouTube channel.
Thank you.
I'm pretty much everybody in my audience has already subscribed. But if they haven't, they need to subscribe to your YouTube channel. Even if that doesn't really work anymore, they should still subscribe.
Just watch the films, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Tim. And as I say, if I'm feeding my goats or editing a new flying saucer video, when a Tim Ventura interview and video comes up, I stop everything and watch it. So thank you very much, Tim.
Oh, thank you in turn, sir.